The Florida evening was warm and sticky as Donald Trump made his way through the marble hallways of his Mar-a-Lago estate. He had just finished hosting a dinner with several business leaders and politicians. These gatherings were common at his Florida home, but tonight something unexpected would catch his attention. As Trump walked toward his private quarters, he noticed a security guard standing near the east entrance. The man looked tired. The kind of tired that comes from working too many hours and carrying too many worries. Despite his exhaustion, the guard stood tall, his uniform neat and his eyes alert. Trump slowed his pace. There was something about this guard he hadn't noticed before. The man was talking quietly on his phone, trying to keep his voice down in the elegant hallway. I know, the guard was saying. I'll figure something out for the tuition payment. Don't worry. I picked up another shift this weekend. There was a pause as he listened to the person on the other end. Tell the kids I'll be home to tuck them in tomorrow night, I promise. It's just these double shifts this week, then things will get better. The guard quickly ended his call when he noticed Trump approaching. He straightened his posture even more and nodded respectfully. Good evening, sir, he said with a professional smile that didn't quite hide the fatigue in his eyes. Evening, Trump replied, studying the man's face. You're working late again. The guard looked surprised that Trump had noticed his schedule. Yes, sir. Covering for a colleague tonight. Trump nodded and continued walking, but something about the encounter stayed with him. As he reached his office, he called in his chief of staff. That security guard at the east entrance, Trump said, settling into his chair. The tall one. What's his story? His chief of staff looked confused. Sir. The guard. Black guy, about 6'2", works a lot of doubles from what I can see. Oh, you mean William, the chief of staff replied. William Thompson. He's been with us about 3 years now. Very reliable. Find out more about him, Trump said. Quietly. Don't make it obvious we're asking. The next morning, as Trump reviewed some business documents, his chief of staff returned with information about William Thompson. The story made Trump put down his pen and listen carefully. William was a veteran who had served honorably in Afghanistan. After the military, he had built a life with his wife and 3 children, but tragedy struck when his wife died from an illness 3 years ago. Since then, he had been working multiple jobs to support his family. 3 jobs? Trump asked, frowning. Yes, sir. He works here, plus weekend security at a local mall and some early morning shifts at a delivery service. His oldest child just started college, and the youngest has health problems that require expensive medication. Trump walked to the window, looking out at the perfectly manicured lawn. And he's still struggling to make ends meet. From what we gathered, yes, but he never complains. His supervisor says he's one of the most reliable team members, always on time, always professional. Trump was quiet for a moment. He thought about the billions he had made throughout his career, the towers with his name on them, the companies he had built. And then he thought about William, who couldn't afford his child's medicine despite working around the clock. Set up a meeting, Trump finally said. Tell him it's about security protocols or something. Don't make it seem unusual. What are you thinking, sir? His chief of staff asked. Trump turned from the window, a determined look on his face. I'm thinking it's time I learned more about what's happening right under my nose. Some things are more important than politics. His chief of staff nodded and left to arrange the meeting, unaware that this simple encounter was about to change not just William's life, but spark a conversation that would reach every corner of the nation. 2 days passed before Trump's staff came back with more details about William Thompson's life. Trump sat in his private study, listening as his chief of staff shared what they had learned from discreet conversations with William's supervisor and co-workers. He's well respected among the security team, the chief of staff explained, referring to a small notepad. Everyone says the same thing. Hardworking, dependable, never brings his problems to work. Trump leaned forward in his chair. Tell me about his family. 3 children. A daughter who's 18 and just started at community college, a son who's 14, and another son who's 9 with pretty severe asthma. His wife passed away from cancer about 3 years ago. The medical bills took most of their savings. Trump frowned. And the military benefits. He served, right? 2 tours in Afghanistan. He was a staff sergeant, honorably discharged. He received some benefits, but it's nowhere near enough with the rising costs of everything, especially in this area. Trump stood up and walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back. So he works here, plus the mall on weekends and delivery in the mornings. How many hours a week is that? Close to 80 hours from what we can tell. Trump shook his head slowly. And when does he see his kids? His elderly mother helps out. She lives with them in a small apartment about 30 minutes from here. The neighborhood's seen better days, but folks look out for each other there. As Trump listened, he remembered his own father, Fred Trump, who had taught him the value of hard work, but also the importance of opportunity. Fred had given him his start with a loan that launched his real estate career. Not everyone had that kind of boost. What about the community? Do they know him? The chief of staff nodded. The local church pastor knows him well. Says William helps with the youth basketball program whenever he can squeeze in the time. He apparently coached his son's team until the third job made it impossible. Trump walked over to his desk and picked up a framed photo of his own children. And the college situation. His daughter got a partial scholarship, but she works part-time too. William's trying to cover the rest so she doesn't end up with loans. The tuition payments are what's killing him financially. That and the younger boy's medicine. Trump put the picture down. How bad is the asthma? Bad enough for hospital visits twice in the past year. The insurance covers some, but the copays and medication costs are still high. Trump was quiet for a moment, thinking this wasn't a political calculation or a business deal. This was about a man just steps away from him every day, living an entirely different reality. What does he want for his kids? Trump finally asked. His chief of staff looked surprised by the question. Sir, his kids. What's he working toward? What's the goal? Oh. The chief of staff checked his notes. His supervisor mentioned that William talks about his daughter becoming a nurse. She's studying healthcare. And the boys, he just wants them to finish school and have more options than he did. Trump nodded, as if confirming something to himself. When's he working next? He'll be on duty tomorrow morning at 6, sir. Good. I want that meeting set up for tomorrow afternoon around 2. Tell him it's about some security concerns I have, nothing to worry about. I don't want him stressed about it. His chief of staff looked curious. May I ask what you're planning, sir? Trump sat back down at his desk and reached for his phone. Sometimes the best investments aren't in buildings or businesses, they're in people. As his chief of staff left to arrange the meeting, Trump made a private call to his financial advisor. The conversation was brief but purposeful. By the time he hung up, he had set wheels in motion that would soon change William's life completely. That night, while William worked his mall security shift, Trump reviewed the notes one more time. Tomorrow would be interesting. He rarely did things without calculating the benefits, but this time felt different. This wasn't about politics or publicity. This was about seeing someone who needed a hand up, not a handout, and having the power to make a difference. At exactly 2 o'clock the next day, William Thompson knocked on the door of Trump's office. He had changed into a fresh uniform for the meeting, his shoes polished to a mirror shine, despite his exhaustion from the morning delivery shift. Come in, Trump called out. William entered, standing tall with the straight posture of his military days. You wanted to see me, sir? Trump looked up from his desk and gestured to the chair across from him. Have a seat, William. William hesitated, surprised to hear Trump use his first name. Most executives barely noticed the security staff, let alone remembered their names. He sat down carefully, perched at the edge of the seat. Relaxed, Trump said. You're not in trouble. Just wanted to talk. William's shoulders loosened slightly, but confusion still showed on his face. About security protocols, sir? Trump leaned back in his chair and studied the man in front of him. Up close, the signs of fatigue were even more apparent, the slight darkness under his eyes, the lines of worry etched around his mouth. That was just to get you in here without raising questions, Trump admitted. I actually wanted to talk about you. William blinked, his expression a mixture of surprise and caution. Me, sir? I noticed you've been working a lot of double shifts lately. William straightened his back even more. Yes, sir. I've been covering for some colleagues. It's not affecting my performance, I assure you. Trump waved away the concern. That's not what I'm getting at. Your work is excellent. I'm more interested in why you're working so much. The question hung in the air between them. William shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable with the personal turn of the conversation. It's just what needs to be done, sir, he finally said. Trump nodded, understanding the man's pride. I heard about your wife. I'm sorry for your loss. William's eyes widened slightly, then softened with an old grief. Thank you, sir. 3 kids on your own, that can't be easy. William looked down at his hands for a moment, then back up, his gaze steady. They're good kids, worth every minute of work. Trump leaned forward, resting his arms on the desk. Tell me about them. Something in Trump's tone must have convinced William this wasn't just small talk. The guard took a deep breath and began to speak about his children. His voice, initially hesitant, grew warm as he described his daughter's determination to become a nurse, his middle son's talent for math, and his youngest boy's brave battles with asthma. And you're working 3 jobs to support them? Trump asked when William paused. William looked embarrassed. You heard about that too. I make it my business to know about the people around me, Trump replied simply. It's temporary, William said, his voice firm with conviction. Once my daughter gets through college, things will ease up. We'll be okay. Trump noted how William spoke about his struggles, not with self-pity but with quiet determination. He was a man who asked for nothing, expected nothing, but gave everything. What if things could be better than okay? Trump asked. William looked confused. Sir. Trump stood up and walked to a side table where a pitcher of water and glasses waited. He poured 2 glasses and handed one to William. I've been in business a long time, Trump said, returning to his seat. I've learned to recognize good people, people with potential that hasn't been fully tapped. William took a sip of water, waiting. I also know what it's like to have people believe in you. Trump continued. My father gave me my start. Not everyone gets that kind of opportunity. William set his glass down carefully. I'm not sure I understand where this is going, sir. Trump smiled slightly. I'm getting there. Sometimes life puts people in your path for a reason. I think that's what happened here. As William listened, his expression shifted from confusion to cautious curiosity. Outside the window, the Florida sun cast long shadows across the manicured grounds, and somewhere in the building, phones rang and staff hurried through their daily routines. But in this office, time seemed suspended as 2 men from vastly different worlds found an unexpected connection. I have a proposition for you, Trump finally said, his eyes steady on William's face. And I think it might change everything. William leaned forward slightly, his hands resting on his knees. What kind of proposition, sir? Trump opened a folder on his desk that William hadn't noticed before. I'm expanding operations at my Chicago property. The security team there needs new leadership, someone with military experience, someone organized, someone who understands both discipline and people. William listened carefully, not yet understanding where this was heading. I need a head of security operations, Trump continued. Someone who can manage a team of 30 people, coordinate with local authorities, and oversee the safety of thousands of guests and employees. Realization began to dawn on William's face. Sir, are you offering me a job? Trump nodded. Triple your current salary, full benefits for you and your kids, and hours that would let you be home for dinner most nights. William's mouth opened slightly, then closed. He looked down at his hands, then back up at Trump, his eyes searching for the catch. I don't know what to say. There's more, Trump said, sliding a piece of paper across the desk. This is the tuition bill for your daughter's college. I'd like to cover the remaining cost personally. William's eyes widened. He stared at the paper without touching it, as if it might disappear if he reached for it. Mr. Trump, I can't accept that. It's too much. It's an investment, Trump replied simply. In her future. In your family's future. William shook his head slowly. Why would you do this? You barely know me. Trump considered the question for a moment. Let me ask you something. If you saw someone drowning and you could swim, would you jump in? Of course, William answered without hesitation. You wouldn't need to know their life story first. Their politics? Their bank balance? William shook his head. No, that wouldn't matter. Well, there you go, Trump said. I see someone working himself to exhaustion to give his kids a chance. I have the resources to help. It's that simple." William still looked skeptical. "But sir, with all due respect, people in your position don't usually notice people in mine." Trump leaned back in his chair. "Maybe they should. I've built towers and golf courses. I've made deals worth billions. But at the end of the day, it's people who matter." A silence fell between them. William's eyes moved to a photo on the wall of Trump with his own children. "I'd need to earn this," William finally said. "Really earn it. I'm not looking for charity." Trump smiled slightly. "That's exactly why I'm offering it to you instead of someone else. This isn't charity. It's an opportunity, one I know you'll make the most of." William took a deep breath. "The Chicago position, would I start right away?" "There would be a transition period. 2 weeks of training here, then a month of overlapping with the current head of security in Chicago before he retires. We provide housing assistance for the move." William's mind was racing, calculating what this would mean for his family. No more 80-hour weeks spread across 3 jobs. No more missing his son's basketball games. No more watching his daughter exhaust herself between classes and her own part-time work. "My youngest has asthma," William said. "He needs regular medical care. The health insurance is comprehensive, and I know specialists at Northwestern Memorial who can help. That's part of the package." William stood up suddenly, turning toward the window. Trump watched him silently, giving him space to process. "This doesn't feel real," William finally said, his back still turned. "Take 24 hours, Trump suggested. Talk to your family. The offer will still be there tomorrow." William turned back, his eyes shining with emotion he was working hard to contain. "Mr. Trump, I don't need 24 hours. This would change everything for my kids. If you're serious." "I'm serious," Trump interrupted. William extended his hand. "Then I accept, and I promise you won't regret it." Trump stood and shook William's hand firmly. "I know I won't." As their handshake ended, neither man fully realized the significance of what had just happened, or how the ripples would soon spread far beyond this room, this building, this city. The media wasn't there to capture the moment. No cameras flashed. No tweets went out. But in that quiet exchange, something remarkable had begun. That evening, William sat at his small kitchen table with his 3 children and his mother. The modest apartment felt different somehow, brighter, more alive with possibility. His mother had tears in her eyes as William finished explaining what had happened in Trump's office that afternoon. "It doesn't make sense," his 18-year-old daughter said, her textbooks pushed aside. "People like him don't just help people like us." Her voice wasn't bitter, just pragmatic beyond her years. "That's what I thought too," William admitted. "I kept waiting for the catch." His 14-year-old son looked up from his plate. "Is there one? A catch?" William shook his head slowly. "Not that I can see. The contract is straightforward. I'd already had a lawyer friend look it over." His mother reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "The Lord works in mysterious ways through all kinds of people." The youngest boy, who had been quiet, suddenly asked, "Does this mean you won't be gone all the time anymore, Dad?" The simple question hit William hard. He reached out and ruffled his son's hair. "That's right, buddy. No more night shifts, no more weekends at the mall." 2 weeks later, William walked into the security office at Trump's Chicago property. He wore a new suit, nothing flashy but well-fitted and professional. The transition training in Florida had gone smoothly, and now came the real test. The security team gathered in the conference room, faces curious and some skeptical. These men and women didn't know him, didn't know why the position hadn't been filled by someone internal. William felt their eyes on him as he stood at the front of the room. "Good morning," he began. "My name is William Thompson. I served 2 tours in Afghanistan with the Army before joining the private security sector." He paused, looking at their faces. "I know what you're thinking. Who is this guy and why is he suddenly in charge?" A few surprised smiles broke out. They hadn't expected this directness. "I'll be honest with you," William continued. 3 weeks ago, I was working 3 jobs to keep my family afloat. Now I'm here. It's a change I never saw coming." He walked along the front of the room, making eye contact with each team member. "But here's what I can promise you. I won't ask anything of you that I wouldn't do myself. I'm here to learn from your experience with this property while bringing my own skills to the table. This isn't about me coming in to shake things up. It's about us working together to make a good team even better. By the end of that first day, William had spoken individually with half the team. By the end of the week, even the most skeptical members were starting to come around. His military background gave him credibility, but it was his willingness to listen that earned their respect. Back at the apartment they were renting until they found a permanent place, William's daughter looked up from her nursing textbooks when he walked in. "How was it?" she asked. "Challenging," William admitted, loosening his tie. "But good, really good." That weekend, Trump called to check in. William was surprised. He had expected the billionaire to forget about him once the arrangement was made. "How's the team responding?" Trump asked after the pleasantries. "Better than I expected," William replied. "They know their jobs. They just needed someone to really see their value." There was a pause on the line. "Sounds familiar," Trump said. William smiled at the connection. "Yes, sir, I suppose it does." As William hung up the phone, his youngest son came running in, waving a piece of paper. "Dad, look." The boy's face was flushed with excitement. "My science project got picked for the school fair." William knelt down to examine the drawing of a solar system model. "That's amazing. When is it?" "Next Tuesday at 2 o'clock. William felt a swell of joy as he realized something simple but profound. "I'll be there," he said, hugging his son. "Front row." The boy's surprised smile was worth everything. For the first time in years, William wasn't just providing for his family, he was present for them. And as he helped his son plan the science project that evening, he realized that the greatest gift Trump had given him wasn't the job or the money. It was time to be the father he had always wanted to be. 3 months flew by. William had settled into his role at the Chicago property, earning the trust of his team and the respect of the management. His family had moved into a comfortable 3-bedroom apartment close to good schools. His youngest son's asthma was under control with regular care from a specialist Trump had recommended. Life had transformed so completely that sometimes William would wake up in the night, momentarily disoriented by the absence of constant worry. He had kept in touch with a few friends from his old security team in Florida, but otherwise, the story of Trump's unexpected offer had remained private. William wasn't one to broadcast his business, and Trump hadn't mentioned it to the press. It was just something that had happened between two men, one with the power to help, and one with the character to deserve it. Until a Tuesday morning in May, when everything changed. William was in his office reviewing the week's schedule when his phone buzzed with a text from a former colleague in Florida. "You seen the news? Check your email now." Confused, William opened his inbox to find a link to a local Florida newspaper. The headline made his heart skip. "Trump's quiet act of kindness. How the former president changed one family's life." Somehow, a reporter had uncovered the story. The article detailed William's background, his struggles as a single father, and Trump's decision to offer him the Chicago position along with covering his daughter's college tuition. There were quotes from William's former supervisor and even the pastor at his old church. William's phone started ringing nonstop. First his mother, then friends, then numbers he didn't recognize. By lunchtime, national news outlets had picked up the story. By dinner, it was trending on social media. Mr. Thompson, his assistant, knocked on his office door. "There are reporters in the lobby asking for you." William ran a hand over his face. He was a private person by nature. The thought of cameras and microphones and strangers picking apart his life made his stomach tight. He picked up his phone and, after a moment's hesitation, called Trump directly. "I saw the news," Trump said when he answered. "How are you holding up?" "Honestly, sir, I'm overwhelmed. I don't know how to handle this kind of attention." There was a pause on the line. "You don't have to talk to them, William. You don't owe anyone your story." "But if I don't say something, they'll just make up their own version, won't they?" Trump chuckled. "I might know something about that." His voice turned serious. "Whatever you decide, my team will support you. Just remember, this is your life, your family. Protect that first." After hanging up, William sat quietly for a few minutes. Then he called his daughter at college. "The reporters found me too," she said. "My roommate's going crazy. She says I'm famous now." William could hear the discomfort in her voice. "You don't have to talk to anyone, honey." "But Dad, maybe we should. Some of the comments online." They're saying Mr. Trump only did this for publicity. But that's not true. He never told anyone. William thought about that. It wasn't right for people to twist something genuine into something political. He'd seen the real Donald Trump, not just the public figure, but the man who'd noticed a tired security guard and decided to help. That evening, William asked the head of public relations at the Chicago property to arrange one brief statement. No individual interviews, no photo shoots, just 5 minutes to set the record straight. The next morning, William stood before a small sea of reporters in the building's conference room. Cameras flashed as he stepped up to the microphones. He wore his regular work suit and spoke without prepared notes. "My name is William Thompson. Yesterday, a private matter between my family and Mr. Trump became public. I'm here for one reason, to tell the truth about what happened." The room went quiet as reporters leaned forward. 4 months ago, I was working 3 jobs and barely seeing my kids. Today, I have a career that lets me be both a provider and a father. Mr. Trump saw someone struggling and had the means to help. He asked for nothing in return, no publicity, no statements, no political support. William looked directly into the cameras. That's the whole story. A simple act of kindness that changed everything for one family. Not because of politics, but because of humanity. Thank you. With that, he walked away from the podium, ignoring the shouted questions that followed. As the door closed behind him, he took a deep breath. Whatever happened next, he had spoken his truth. 6 months after William's brief press statement, the media storm had settled. The story had sparked intense debate across the country. Some praised Trump's generosity, while others questioned his motives. Politicians on both sides tried to use the story to their advantage. But through it all, William and his family kept their heads down and focused on their new life. On a crisp autumn morning, William's daughter graduated from nursing school. Sitting in the audience, William felt a pride so overwhelming it nearly took his breath away. Next to him sat his mother, both boys, and, surprisingly, Donald Trump himself. Trump had called the week before. "I'd like to be there, if that's okay with you and your family," he'd said. "No press, no cameras, just as a friend." William had hesitated, then agreed. Some things were more important than politics or public opinion. After the ceremony, as graduates and families mingled on the lawn, William's daughter approached Trump with her diploma in hand. "Thank you for coming," she said, extending her hand. "And thank you for believing in us." Trump shook her hand warmly. "The hard work was all yours. Congratulations." Later that day, as they celebrated at a local restaurant, Trump brought up an idea he'd been considering. "William, I've been thinking about what happened with us, how one opportunity changed things for your family." William nodded, listening carefully. "I want to create something more permanent. A foundation to help other veterans with families, people who are working hard but need a bridge to something better." "What kind of foundation?" William asked. "Job training, education scholarships for their kids, healthcare support. The things that make the difference between just surviving and really living." Trump paused. "And I'd like you to help me shape it. No one knows better than you what would actually help." William looked around the table at his family, his mother with tears of joy still in her eyes, his beaming daughter in her graduation cap, his sons healthy and happy. A year ago, he couldn't have imagined sitting here, let alone being asked to help create opportunities for others. "I'd be honored," he said simply. 2 weeks later, Trump announced the foundation at a small press conference. William stood beside him, not as a prop or a symbol, but as a partner. The foundation would focus on helping veterans who were single parents, with special attention to those with children facing medical challenges. As Trump outlined the initiative, William watched the reporters taking notes. The cynicism he'd seen in their eyes during his press statement months ago had softened. This wasn't just a one-time act of kindness, it was becoming something bigger, something that could help hundreds of families. When it was William's turn to speak, he stepped up to the microphones with confidence that would have been unimaginable a year earlier. "I was lucky," he began. "Someone saw me when I was invisible to most people. But there are thousands of veterans out there working multiple jobs, missing their kids' childhoods, doing everything right and still barely keeping their heads above water." The room was completely silent as he continued. "This foundation isn't about charity, it's about opportunity. It's about recognizing that sometimes Good people just need a door opened for them. Once that door is open, they'll walk through it on their own strength. That evening, after putting his youngest son to bed, William sat on the balcony of his apartment. The city lights spread out before him, a reminder of how far he had come from that exhausted security guard working triple shifts. His phone buzzed with a text from his daughter, who was moving into her new apartment before starting her job at the children's hospital. Guess what? My neighbor is a single mom veteran with 2 kids. Already told her about the foundation. William smiled. The ripples were spreading already. Inside, on the refrigerator door, held by magnets, was a letter from Trump that had arrived with the foundation paperwork. William had read it so many times he knew the words by heart. Some things transcend politics. Some things are just about seeing another human being and reaching out a hand. Thank you for reminding me of what really matters. In that moment, William realized that the story wasn't just about how his life had changed. It was about how 2 people from different worlds had found common ground in the simple act of one human being helping another.